Hey, how you doing, guys? I'm going to tell you about some problems I've been having with Final Cut Pro 10 and Compressor, both of them. And as I talk about them, I'll show you a screencast and four different problems. Using compressor settings within Final Cut Pro 10, you can do not working. Send to compressor won't work as well. Opening compressor itself, by itself, it crashes. Or sending the master file would crash Final Cut Pro 10 entirely. And actually, the only way to fix this is to reinstall Final Cut Pro 10 and Compressor, and then it would fix it for a while. Could be a couple of weeks, could be usually months. I haven't had problems with it in about 5 or 6 months, but it'd always come back. And it's not always the best way of doing things, because then that means I have to reinstall all my settings and plugins for Final Cut Pro 10 and Compressor. So DaVinci 14.1 came to the rescue, and it actually helped me finish and complete the project and render it out. So I basically couldn't render out at all using Final Cut Pro 10 to the various problems. So DaVinci Resolve saved the day, version 14.1, and I simply exported out the video file from Final Cut Pro 10 as an XML file, and then opened it up in DaVinci Resolve, and everything transitioned beautifully, with a few exceptions. Some of the texting was a little out of place, and then for some reason the color correction didn't necessarily carry over. Which I understand it does. I think Final Cut Pro 10 is one of the few that do on the most part, but I did have a few plugins and things that wouldn't transition over simply because I don't have it on DaVinci, so obviously maybe that's why it didn't work. But I pretty much did all of the color correction within DaVinci Resolve itself, so that wasn't a big issue. Now, I actually did a lot of looking into DaVinci Resolve itself, and I also found out something very interesting. We're actually going to the preferences, and we're going to take over the hardware configuration, which I made sure that everything was set correctly. Now, if you look at the GPU processing mode, not only does it work with CUDA and OpenCL itself, any video card that uses it, it actually does Apple's Metal as well, which was actually quite surprising. So we went ahead and used the Metal version of acceleration. Now, interestingly enough, you can select the GPU if you have more than one. Now, it was set on auto. I decided, since it only selected one video card, I went to manual, so both of them are selected. I don't know if it really makes a difference, or they still use both GPUs within DaVinci Resolve, whether you have an auto or manual, I don't know, but I figure if I put in manual, it does show two, so just in case. So that's some great inclusion for the DaVinci Resolve 14.1. So very happy with the results of DaVinci Resolve 14, and I really like that. So with all the problems with Final Cut Pro 10 and Compressor, I started taking a very serious look at DaVinci Resolve 14.1, and I kind of took a different approach to learning it. Sure, I've dabbled in it a whole lot, constantly practicing, and so for this one, I took a different approach. I actually spent the next 3 hours just learning the interface, just playing with things, seeing how it worked, and I found out it's very, very similar to Final Cut Pro 10, and really many video editors are really very much the same, just in how you do things. So I've been finding many things are almost exactly the same. So once I did that, it blew me away, because I learned it actually much faster, and possibly even replacing Final Cut Pro 10 in many ways. So I could actually maybe start the project in Final Cut Pro 10, do an XML out to DaVinci Resolve and finish it out, or do the project entirely in DaVinci Resolve itself. So even though it's very sad that Final Cut Pro 10 is constantly giving me these error messages, there's actually a silver lining in this. It actually helped me to learn DaVinci Resolve 10 times faster than just doing it, learning it by myself. So that's a bit of good news. So give me your thoughts on this if you had the same problems, and possibly pointing me to fix as well. Appreciate it. Thanks.